Welcome back to MVM. Today we have a preview. This one is for the second expansion to Role Player from Thunderworks Games. It is a 1 to 5 player game in which you are building a role-playing character. This adds some new content from the original game and some brand new elements to the game, period.
Yeah, two things in particular, Fiends and Familiars. That's the core element that you add to this game. We'll go over those details in a minute, as well as talk about how this game has progressed from the original to the second expansion to this one.
All right, so let's first talk about the things that it's added that have already existed in Role Player before. So, Monsters and Minions introduced Monsters and Minions. In this game, you have 6 new monsters, 1 for each of the different colors. You have new adventure cards for each of these monsters. These are all going to provide some kind of element at the end of the game that you're trying to defeat. You also have a brand new stack of minions. There's a lot of minions in here, and the cool thing about these minions is they add some elements that weren't in the original game. For instance, these gremlins here, if you're able to defeat them at their highest value, they allow you to take a free intelligence action. Those type of things didn't exist in the Monsters and Minions, but now there's all kinds of varieties and bonuses that you get when you defeat them.
Yeah, there's a lot of bonuses you can get in this new expansion from a variety of different sources that allow you to effectively do those actions that the dice normally let you do. Because in the original game, you might fill out one of those spaces and then you can't use that action anymore. This one lets you do it a few more different ways.
Yeah, there's 20 new minions, and then you have 32 new market cards. Again, these come in level 1 and level 2. These are all going to be mixed together with either the base game or with the first expansion's Monsters and Minions, and you're going to mix that into one giant market deck and remove some of those cards depending upon the number of players that you're playing. Also, each of the players is going to have one additional class card that they're going to be able to pick from. So the base game had one class card for each of the 6 different colors. Monsters and Minions introduced a second class card, and now you have 3 class cards which are double-sided. So now when you pick the color white, for example, you have 6 different classes that you get to choose from in doing so. Now there's 2 more things we want to talk about before we get into the name of the expansion itself. There are split dice in the game, and then there's the call to adventure game. Both of these kind of work in unison. Split dice are very cool. There's an X number of these split dice that are going to be used. One, they're going to represent each of the different types of colors in the game. The dice have 2 different facings, so they can be one of 2 different colors when you use them. Also, they have pip values of 1 to 4. So although they have more range on how you can use them on your board, they have fewer pips on them, so they're not going to be as valuable, but they have more flexibility. The other thing is the call to adventure card. This is really unique. So this call to adventure card is going to be entered an X number of spaces down below the market deck, or the top of the market deck. This call to adventure card does one thing and one thing only. It is going to guide the players to draw 2 dice from the bag and place them on each one of these initiative cards instead of 1. So every round, you're now drafting 2 cards, or 2 dice instead of 1 die. And this is actually going to reveal itself an X number of turns through the game, meaning that when it's revealed, you're going to replace this in the market, and then you're only drawing 1 die for the rest of the turn. The reason why you need these more dice in the game is because of 2 things. 1, instead of starting with 8 dice at the start of the game, now you're only starting with 6. The second thing is now you have a familiar board above your player board. These player boards are really cool. There's 10 of these familiars, and they all work very similar to like the backstories and the class that you have by trying to get combinations of dice, but they also provide special abilities to the game.
Yeah, like Jeremy said, there are a wide variety, in fact 10 of these different familiars that you can add above the top of your board. These are effectively different types of creatures. They are going to have 3 spaces for the dice and their own sort of attribute objective for those as well. They also come, like we said, with some unique powers. For instance, this owl here has the keen ability. This says after placing a die on the screech owl, you can change one of the split die that we just mentioned to another value on your board. So it has a built-in effect for those split die that are added in this expansion. And then we've got the Blood Badger. The Blood Badger says, after placing a die on the Blood Badger, you may banish a Fiend. If you do, gain 1 XP. Which brings us to the Fiends.
Fiends are probably one of the most unique elements and probably one of the coolest elements to this game. That's because they tie in very specifically to the initiative cards. We have a 3-player game set up, meaning that you're using 4 initiative cards. These initiative cards are new to this game, meaning that they've added new cards that are going to replace the old cards, and they're going to have 1 more initiative card than the number of players. In this case, 4 cards. As we already alluded to, you're seeing the dice, 2 dice, because it's at the start of the game, but you're going to notice 2 new areas. At the bottom of some of these cards, they're going to say Fiend, and that's because these are bad things that you're going to also be drafting when you take the higher value dice. These Fiends, if you take this particular 3 initiative card, you get this Fiend of Tuition with it, and it says at the beginning of the market phase, lose 1 gold. These Fiends are going to stay face up in front of you for the rest of the game. However, you can expend some gold in order to get rid of them, even one of your charisma tokens that you gain from the charisma track to get rid of them, or in the case of the familiar that you had, you can also get rid of them that way. However, it punishes those people who just want to draft the high value die because they're always better to fill out the powers on your attribute track. But they're going to provide some kind of negative response when they hit that player board.
Yeah, and these ongoing effects can be pretty nasty. In fact, these are some of the nastiest ongoing effects I've seen in a game. However, when you take these things, you might be able to ride some of those effects out depending on how you're playing your game. You might take a card that does something that's bad for one player, but maybe not so much for your engine. And like we said, there are things you can do and elements you can use in the game to banish those Fiends, which will have a positive impact in general, but also potentially when you're fighting some monsters.
There's one more thing I should mention when you're playing the game. As I earlier mentioned, the Call to Adventure card is going to stay out until it's revealed. You're going to be taking 2 of these dice every turn and then placing them on your player board. However, when you take these 2 die, you're only effectively using 1 of them to trigger the ability. So for instance, if I take these 2 2s and I place them on my player board, I'm only picking strength or dexterity in this case, not both of those. And again, that's going to continue until that Call to Adventure comes out, and then you're only drafting 1 for the rest of the game. The game structurally is going to end in the same way the moment that all the players have all their attributes filled up with dice, including that familiar board with 3 there as well. That's going to signify the end of the game, and you're going to score just the way you did in the original game. You're going to fight that boss monster and try to defeat it, and then tally up all the points from all the different things on your player board. So that is Fiends and Familiars, a really, really cool expansion. I think it's actually a better expansion than Monsters and Minions because it adds those Fiend cards, adds these Familiars that just add that little bit of layering to the game that wasn't really there before. Very cool. Thunderworks games, 1 to 5 player games, so you can play it solo, and there's a whole bunch of new cards for solo mode as well. If you have any questions, make them in the comments below. Subscribe to us, follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and also follow us on Instagram, and we will catch you guys next time.
Bye-bye.